I'm going to stay next to you in order to see if everything is working well, okay? Just to be sure.
Let's see. All right, starting good.
Yep. Yeah, okay. I'll leave you on stage.
Good morning, everyone. I'm super happy to be here. And today I'm going to take you on a tour to this, if it was working, okay, I'll use this, to this beautiful little garden that I call Design System. So yeah, this is me. As you can see, I like to do crazy creative projects like hand drawing illustrations on Figma to prepare a talk. And today I want to tell you the history behind the design system that we've created in our company and how we've been maintaining it without a dedicated team. So hopefully you'll get some ideas to try on your own. And right now, just enjoy the journey. Let's go. Starting back in 2020, 4 years ago, I joined a startup company, a SaaS company called Pigment. And we didn't have a product yet, but we were cooking up something pretty big. So I joined the front-end team. And this was the whole engineering team. So it was already pretty big for a one-year-old startup company. But Pigment had great ambitions. So I need to try to explain to you what we were going to try to do so you get the context. Pigment was building one solution for all different types of teams in every industry, and it will allow them to build beautiful dashboards, dynamic reports, plans, and forecasts. So that's a lot of not very concrete stuff, but in tech stuff, it means we're going to build a flexible, customizable tool that could cover many business cases, like finance, HR, sales, supply chain, and so on. And it would mean that we would have to support imports, inputs, compute data, format data, display any data. And if all of this is still blurry for you, this is what we had in mind. We had to build a modeling engine with pivot tables and complex configuration tools. We had to build dashboards with widgets, all different types of widgets, filtering, sorting, and stuff. And this is only the tip of the iceberg. So the product was quite complex. And you can already see from those 2 pages that there were common components that were going to be reused all over the platform. So we thought, OK, we want to go fast, we want to be efficient, we want to build something great, so let's start actually building a design system at the start. So that was my first mission, while the 7 other developers were working on the formulas, computations of data. I was in charge of planting the seeds for the design system V0. I chose to use Material UI for the base of the design system, and I can probably hear you screaming like, why did you do this? If I had to make the choice again today, I'd probably consider unstyled libraries like React Aria or other solutions. But it's 2020. At the time, Material UI was mature enough. It fit the behaviors that we wanted to have for the design components. So we just went with it. What we did was creating a private package, NPM package, where we would expose our own components. And under the hood, we would be using Material. So we would have our own sets of props, and inside use the Material components. That means if one day we want to ditch Material, we can just do the change inside those components and not have to go over all the platform. Over the years, we did some improvements, and we changed the strategy for exposing our interface. So instead of forwarding all the props that Material offers on all their components, we would just handpick the ones that we wanted to really use. This makes everything easier to maintain, because if they do any breaking change, then you only have one place to change to fix the thing. And yeah, it's less things to maintain, it's better control. You could say, yeah, but it's less flexible and less practical to use. But over the years, we really experienced that it was better to control the usages of the components that you expose from your library. And to ease bumps, we added some snapshot tests. That way, we could detect on a new version. If the tests were breaking, that would mean we would have to do manual visual checks. And it was cheap enough to add and to maintain. For the styling, we had style components on our app, so we just used it to wrap the components and override material styles. We doubled the specificity to avoid collisions with material styles and really make sure that we could override it. And we used hard references on the classes that would ease bump, and if they were changing some things internally, that would not affect us. For the documentations, we used Storybook. We had a playground to be able to check any combinations of props on the components to see what it looks like. And we had stories that would list all the possibilities and all the variants of the components. That was quite useful for QA. And as you can see, it's really not something fancy that we did. We just went for something simple. We focused on the MVP. And it's the same for the components that we actually created. A couple of things that I could probably share with you. For the colors, we grouped them by usages. And same over the years, we introduced an internal palette. So the internal palette is all the colors that are used for designers, so they know what blue is, what green is, what red is. But for developers, we expose the colors by usage, so they know that if they have a typography, then this is what they should use. If they want to have a display of warning, this is what they should use. For the spacings, we have spacing units, and we have a helper that helps us. Yeah, helper helps. We have a helper that will populate the style for us in any case. And that means that designers don't have to do pixel-perfect mockups, because you can just guess, OK, if it's 10, it probably means 12. If it's 11, it probably means 12. So I don't have to think too much about it. And we used TypeScript just to narrow down the props and be able to let the developers know, OK, what should I do with this helper? For the icons, we settled on a pattern for the naming of those icons, and the naming should match the ones that they had on Figma for the icons. And we also created a story where we had all the icons available. That way you could just look for the one if you could not find it on the mockup. You know what already exists in the code. You can search them by name, and we also added a shortcut. By clicking on the icon, it just copies the name of the file, and you're ready to use it inside your code. For the components that we actually created for this V0, there's nothing fancy. It's the most usual ones that we could use for form and interactions and for presenting information. So that was it. V0 of our design system was a packaged library of components with a storybook for documentations and some components matching in Figma. And so whenever we had to build a feature, the developers would just go to the design system, pick up what they need, and sometimes even do some adjustments, and they were good to go. And over that time, actually, the team grew a lot. We hired 6 more developers. And so all of these developers, from any profiles, we could have more full-stack profile, more back-end profile, but they still needed to do something in the front. So they would just go to the library, get what they need, bring their own little contributions sometimes. And that's how we build the basis of our app. So in 2021, end of year, we opened for business. We started the beta. We had great feedback from our clients. That means the company kept growing. And so from 14 developers, the year after, we were 22. And in 2022, we were 33. And as you can see, the balance switched between the front-end skills that we have. So we had 9 front-end profiles and 21 people that were more back-end and a bit full stack. We were working in 8 different feature teams, and each team had different front-end needs. They also had different front-end skills and seniority in each. And regarding the product, it became much more complex and much more polished. And of course, that reflected on the design system. It got many more components, some updates. As you can see, it looks a bit more professional. And so one day in June, I was working on a new feature. I went to the design system, and I took a step back and I actually realized that it's become a bit messy over the years. So we had some inconsistencies, we had some frustrations using it, and so I wanted to do something about it. But how to improve the design system without a dedicated team? How can you have impact in your company while there's no official time allocated on the roadmap? So I came up with a plan, and I branded it the Design System Task Force. So it was, I need to brand it because, if you want to have something happen in your company, you need to make people excited about something. So first, I had to find champions, because I know I couldn't pull anything by myself. I didn't have the time. I was working on other features. So I had to find the people that would help me do things about the design system. I wanted to assemble a task force because I was counting on team emulation to motivate people. And I thought about the format, and I figured 1 hour a week is not much during your week, and if it's to work for the benefit of your company, it's worth taking it, especially on a Friday. As you know, it's our most productive day, so it's always nice to gather with other people that have the same interests to spend some time. So I went to see my front-end buddies, the ones that I knew would be interested in the topic, and it didn't take too much time to convince them, because we were not working in the same team, and it was a great opportunity for us to work hand in hand and learn from each other. So I had my tech team squad. Now I needed an ally on the design side. We went to the head of design, and it didn't take too much time to convince him because, well, he had a lot of improvements that he wanted to do, and he was happy that some people were going to be working on it. And so with those champions, it was quite easy to assemble a task force and find new people that would be interested working on the topic. We gathered all the designers from the company and a couple more developers, and we were ready to start. We started with a round of retrospective, so it took a lot of time having everyone tell their experience with the design system and give some feedback, but I believe it was necessary to do this and take the time because, well, we needed to build trust first for this team. We were not all working with each other. A lot of people were working from remote. Some people were more junior. They would be maybe intimidated by others. So breaking the ice by having a roundtable and letting everyone speak was really helpful. From the feedback that we got, we settled on common goals. And we were using those to prioritize the tasks that we wanted to do, and everyone would own one of them since they were the ones suggesting it. After those retrospectives, our weekly meetings evolved around a Kanban board. So we would use that meeting to propose some ideas, to sync with each other's designers and developers to get started, and share on what was going on. So it was great to do some small improvements like code cleaning or design adjustments, or to do some repetitive tasks like you want to align all the props of your library, or you want to update the stories. It was quite easy to take 2 hours of time. You know, when you're in between a review or in between 2 features, you're waiting for something, and you just go to the board, you pick up a ticket that's have clear things spec'd inside, and you just do it within those 2 hours. For more complex features that required deeper investigation or broader refactoring, we still have to push them to the roadmap. And the only ones that got through were the ones that were actually linked to a feature. And so what was our plan regarding the design system? First thing first, we defined more clearly a set of guidelines to work with. We based everything on the specificity of our teams. So as we're a fast-growing company, we needed to scale, and not at the expense of having inconsistencies in the app or lowering our quality bar of design. As we had various front-end skills in our teams, we needed a single source of truth so that developers with less UX affinities would still be able to build something that's consistent and meets our standards. And all the more this makes sense because we had limited design bandwidth and no dedicated design system team. And so with those stakes in mind, we set out the list of rules that would help us take any decision when making an update on the design system. So minimizing the amount of elements, it means less maintenance, so you will have actually less things to do. Reusing existing components and not creating too many variants would also mean less maintenance. And it's also less work for the developers when they need to use a component. If there's less choice, there's less chances that they would get it wrong, or they would spend time figuring out what are the combinations that they need. When we were sure we wanted to introduce any change, we would try to anticipate and figure out how this component would be used in other contexts. So we would make sure and pay extra extension to the props and the interface that we would define in those cases. And finally, we wanted to remain practical. So we wanted to have simple props exposed and using TypeScript to narrow down the combinations of props that were valid. That way, it's a no-brainer when you use a component and you save time on implementation. And so we worked over a year and we reached a point where we were happier with the design system that we could call V1. And I'm going to explain to you through different improvements what we did. On the design side, they settled a few guidelines when they needed to create a new component and what they needed to prepare for the developers to use. So first thing first, they had to validate the need of introducing any change because we wanted to maintain consistency and standardize everything that we created. When they created components, they had some rules to follow, so following the guidelines, make it easy to use, and make sure to have one single source of truth, so aligning with developers. How am I going to call the props? So we can share a common language, and when you see something in Figma, you know that it matches the thing in the code. We created a checklist with the designers and the developers, so they know what actually us developers need when we need to implement a component. On the tech side, we documented how to work with the design system on a daily basis, And the documentation was on Notion, so we could easily share that operating mode to any newcomer or any developer that would not often work with the backend. So when integrating a mockup, there is a sequence of things that you need to check. So first, what are the design system components that are used on the platform? Are there any updates that are included within that feature? And if there is an update, let's confirm with the designer that this was intentional. So do we really need this slight change on the design system? Do we really need this component, or can we just reuse something that's already existing? And if we had to make a change, then we would have to pay attention on what props we would have on the components. So as you can see, it's quite similar, the operating mode for designers and developers, and it all follows the same rules. So same, when creating a new component, you would have to document the change, update it on the storybook so that the designers can actually know what has been implemented. And finally, communicate, so share with the team, and without that, you cannot scale on the design system. Finally, there were two streamlines where we focused our efforts on because it would both benefit the design and the handoff. Regarding storybook improvements, we defined a consistent layout, so we only have the documentation page. We started with the playground, so people could just play around and find a combination of props to see how the component would look like. And then we would have all variants and special use case. So you could have at one place how the component looks like, and it's great for QA. On the design side, they had a Pigment component library, and as you can see, the props should be matching the ones on the storybook. And we've been experimenting with a Figma plugin where you could actually check the storybook from Figma. So you would select a frame, see the components that were used on Figma, and you could just select a component and see the documentation and the storybook that's been implemented. So you don't have to switch windows, and you could just do everything from there. Now we've reached the goals we settled at first, and what did we do after? What happened to that design system task force? So show of hands, like, who hates meetings? Okay, that's what I figured. So we're the same at a company. We hate meetings, and so meeting 1 hour a week has been a bit tedious. And what we did was just replacing that 1 hour meeting with a quick 15-minute stand-up. And so within that stand-up, we would just propose our ideas and then do the rest asynchronously. We even went further, so we had a Slack bot reminding us every week, hey, do you have any topic to share regarding the design system? And we would just reply and say, yes, I want to talk about this or that, and I need that person to give me their opinion. And if some weeks we didn't have anything to share, then we just cancel the meeting. And in the end, we just fully stopped having this weekly sync, and everything happened on the Slack channel that we prepared. So on this channel, if you had a question about an update for a feature, you could just go there and ask for opinions. If you were working on a new component, you could just share it here and get some feedbacks. And if you spotted any changes or any discussions regarding the design system, you could just forward them to that channel so they could start a thread and everyone would be aware of the things that are happening. Finally, to ease decision-making, we designated one owner on the tech side and one owner on the design side so that if we couldn't reach an agreement, they would be the one deciding. So this was our design system V1. We had a single source of truth in Storybook, and it was mirrored on Figma. we had a set of guidelines for creation and updates. All the significant changes would fit the roadmap, and the small little ones could be taken on the side. We based everything on collaborative participation and reviews, thanks to a Slack channel that was used for decision-making and sharing. And this has been what we've been doing for a year, and so far, so good. If I had to share the key learnings I got from this experience, it would be that even if you don't have a dedicated team, you still need strong pillars to carry on that project. You need to tailor things to your constraints, so there's no unique recipe that would work. I'm telling you the story of how we've organized, but in your own company, I'm sure you have your own constraints, and you need to figure out how this works. And be patient, nothing is built over a day. As you can see, we did the change over a couple of years. The secret ingredient, I would say, would be to create a trusting environment, to build habits, and foster initiatives, and also iterate, because you never know if something changes in your company, you need to adapt. And finally, communication. Nothing can work if you don't have a dedicated team, and if your team gets larger. You need to communicate and make sure everyone is aligned, everyone knows what are the latest updates, what are the new ways to do things. On the technical side, I would say you need to start small, but do start early. With a single source of truth, both for design and tech, it's much easier, because if you say, okay, designers, what's implemented is the source of truth, so don't go and do crazy stuff with the mockups. Just check what is implemented, and we would go faster, and you have more chance to have your whole design implemented. By limiting customizations, we save a lot of time. It means that we need to make compromise on the design side, but honestly, for maintenance, it's much more simpler, especially if you don't have dedicated people to maintain it. And regarding maintenance, a couple of things that we learned the hard way would be not using Swiss Army knife components that would do everything, and rather split them into usage-oriented components. So one component would do this, one component would be used in that other context. And finally, do not let anyone override the design system components on the apps. Why? Because if you say, OK, it's easy enough, let's take this button and let's introduce this new color because I need it to pop out in this specific case. But then if you do an update on the button from the design system, then maybe your button that you overrode would be broken. And you don't want to go over all your platform to check all the usages of a single button just to make a change that could affect everything. And so this is the end of our tour. Thank you very much.